All right, well, thank you all for joining us today for the Iowa Hunger Coalition's webinar on engaging with candidates. My name is Luke Elzinga, and I am joined today by EJ Wallace, who's going to be co-presenting. Before we get started, just wanted to let everyone know they can ask questions in the chat or use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and then we can call on you to ask your question. I think we'll just take the questions as they arise rather than wait till the end. I think that'll probably be easiest. So we will go ahead and get started. My name is Luke Elzinga. I am the chair of the Iowa Hunger Coalition. I've been on the board for 3 years now. I work at the DMARC Food Pantry Network in Des Moines, Iowa. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the Hunger Coalition in just a minute, but first wanted to turn it over to our kind of guest co-host, EJ Wallace with Save the Children Action Network. And EJ, could you introduce yourself and just tell people a little bit about SCAN if they're not familiar?
Sure. So can everybody hear me okay? All right. You never know with these computers. But yeah, like Luke said, my name is EJ Wallace. I actually just recently got promoted to regional advisor for state and electoral campaigns for Save the Children Action Network. And so it's my job to mentor organizers like myself in my region. But basically, Save the Children Action Network is the political advocacy arm of Save the Children. Save the Children's been around for a little over 100 years and has been committed ever since to advocate for children all the time in times of crisis to ensure that they have everything that they need to thrive and be protected from harm. We have domestic programs as well as international programs protecting children from harm. And also facilitate after school and school age programs in mostly the rural South. Save the Children Action Network was created to build political juice behind a lot of the expertise that we've built over the past 100 years. And I am fortunate to have been one of the first field organizers hired by SCAN to build community action teams in Iowa to engage political candidates, both at the state level, but also those presidential candidates that come in every 4 years to try and talk to voters and get their support. We base our advocacy on the model of community action teams and volunteer engagement. So I'm the only full-time permanent staff in the state. Everything else is organized by community action teams of volunteers in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, the central Iowa Des Moines area, and Sioux City area. Those folks self-organize different activities from supporting parents and helping to talk about issues that are related to their struggles around childcare and early education, to food insecurity, and making sure that parents and providers know that they're not alone and that we as a group have real power to engage candidates and elected leaders on issues that matter to us, to really build a bipartisan slate of elected leaders that know that they have to be held accountable to children. So that's a little bit about us and myself. I'll kick it back to Luke.
Thank you, EJ, and thanks for being willing to join us today and share some of your expertise. So very quickly, wanted to go over kind of who the Iowa Hunger Coalition is for those of you who may not be familiar. I know we've got a lot of our members on the call today, but for those of you who do not know, we are a membership-based 501c4 organization. We have a volunteer board of directors and no paid staff members. And we use our collective voice to educate and advocate for policies that would eliminate food insecurity and build equitable food systems in our state. And we really do focus on the state level and engaging with our state house legislators and things that are happening in the Iowa State House. So today we're here to talk about engaging with candidates, and just wanted to first kind of go over what are permissible electoral advocacy activities for 501c3 nonprofits? So again, Iowa Hunger Coalition's a C4, but I know a lot of the organizations that we work with. The organization that I work at, DMARC, is a 501c3. And there are things that you need to take into account when you are engaging with candidates to make sure everything is in line with the law. So kind of backing up just a little bit, I wanted to talk about kind of advocacy versus lobbying. And advocacy is kind of a broader term that talks about all sorts of ways you engage with candidates and the public. And lobbying is much more specific. So while all lobbying kind of falls under the umbrella of advocacy, not all advocacy is lobbying. So advocacy is really just a general term for actions that speak in favor of or recommend a particular course of action or a cause, or really just getting your message out there about the work that you do. So this can include a wide variety of things. The list I have here is by no means exhaustive. So, this includes things like educating legislators, candidates, elected officials, your supporters, the general public about your issue, telling the story of your organization and the people you assist. It can also include things like nonpartisan voter registration, and then can also include lobbying for a particular piece of legislation. And there's kind of two modes of lobbying. So there's what we call direct lobbying, which is really asking a legislator to take a particular stance on a piece of legislation. So this is something that we do during the session, asking a legislator to, we really want you to not support this bill, or please support this particular piece of legislation. That is direct lobbying. Grassroots lobbying is very similar. That's when you are engaging your network of supporters of the general public to kind of let them know about what's happening and include some sort of call to action. So direct lobbying is me talking with the legislator saying, please support this bill. Grassroots lobbying is me sending out an email to IHC's list saying, hey, please contact this candidate and ask them to support this bill. And I want to make something really clear here that 501c3 nonprofits can lobby, as long as it's not a substantial activity of the organization. And it's kind of vague. The IRS doesn't have a kind of great bar. I know typically organizations think 20%, 15%, as long as it's under that, it's not a substantial part. There is if you're doing a lot of lobbying, you could look at what's called a 501h election. That has some specific guidelines for how much you can spend based on your organization's budget size. I feel like it's fairly safe to say that for everyone here, you're doing direct service, you're doing all sorts of other work. I think you would need to engage in a whole lot of lobbying for it to be considered a substantial part of your organization's activities. If you have any concerns about that, I can give you some resources, but I think it's fair to say that that's not something anyone in this webinar should really be concerned about. Now, specifically talking about electoral advocacy, there's some more specific guidelines for nonprofits. And really it's that 501c3 nonprofits cannot provide any sort of support for or against a particular candidate. So 501c3 nonprofit organizations cannot endorse or oppose a candidate. the organization cannot donate to a candidate. And you can't rate candidates at all. So you can't, and a lot of this, you have to be careful even in how you're kind of presenting things. If you have one person's photo with like green, happy, smiling, and another one and kind of like a red, menacing look, like that has the connotation or the perception that you are supporting one candidate over another. So you want to be careful. And likewise, if you're posting a picture on social media or something when you met with a candidate, avoid saying anything like, can't wait to, work with you when you're in the Iowa legislature or anything like that, because then there's a perception that you are hoping they win the election. And again, there's kind of that implicit endorsement there. So you do have to be careful in that regards, but there's a lot that you can do. So, you can educate candidates about your organization and your issue. One thing that we recommend is when you're reaching out to schedule meetings with candidates, that you're extending invitations to all of the candidates for a particular office. And you can also distribute nonpartisan questionnaires to candidates. So this is something that the Hunger Coalition did a few years back with the Vote to End Hunger questionnaire. Make sure you're sending the same questions to all the candidates. You want to be very clear on the language, that there's not any sort of partisan bent there. And then when you are sharing that information, you have to be sure that you're sharing it in a neutral way. So again, you can't have any sort of rankings or ratings or provide any sort of commentary on, hey, we really liked what this candidate said and we didn't like what this candidate said. You really just have to present, here's the question we asked, here's the response we received from the candidate, and that's it. It has to be very neutral. This is just a form of education for voters. Are there any questions here on some of the do's and don'ts of electoral advocacy? Or EJ, anything that you would add? Okay, well, seeing none, and again, feel free to post anything in the chat if it comes to you.
I would just say that even though there are restrictions on what an organization can do, and I know that especially for me, I'm the face of Save the Children Action Network, but I am a citizen. I do have rights as a voter, and so you are 100%, 1000%, whatever you want to say, able to vote for the candidate that you support and discuss your preferences with your friends in a private setting. Depending on the social media guidelines for your particular organization, there's also protected free speech and other things. What I would recommend, if you're nervous about your organization being attributed to your particular political or social preferences, what I would do is I would post anything that you think is political with a preface, personal post, or this is my personal opinion, and also include that caveat in the description within your social media account. That is something that we encourage our staff to do as well. It's always been encouraged for me to say my opinions are my own and not a reflection of my organization or my work. So that is something to take into consideration. That said, reporters and even if it's an opponent of the candidate that you particularly prefer, this has happened to us, where they catch on that a particular person was in favor of another candidate and then wrote an article about our organization being in favor of that particular political candidate. These are things that you can help. It may be a tactic of a particular campaign, but that is just a piece of information to help you be careful, but also help empower you to understand that you have the right as a voter to be able to prioritize your particular candidate or party or issue.
Thank you, EJ. That is a great point. Thanks for adding that, because we do want to make sure that everyone is, civically engaged personally as well, and feel like they can do those sort of things. I saw a question from Natalie Veldhaus asking if there are rules for groups who want to advocate or lobby that aren't a nonprofit, like some mutual aid groups. I would have to check, but I don't believe that they are bound by those same rules as a 501c3 nonprofit, because they would not have the 501c3 tax exempt status that prohibits a lot of these things. But I would encourage, if that kind of falls under what you do, I really love this website and this group, boulderadvocacy.org. They have a ton of great resources on their website, all sorts of toolkits and guides and FAQs. A lot of the language that I used on the previous slides was taken from them. So I wish I had a better kind of concrete answer. I don't believe those same rules would apply, but I think you would probably want to check and kind of do your due diligence first. So I hope that answers that question. And yeah, would encourage you to check out Boulder Advocacy. And if there's not anything on their website, to maybe shoot them an email or something like that. All right, any other questions? Okay, so now I wanted to talk about who is running for office this fall. And first, talk about the redistricting process. So hopefully everyone is aware of the redistricting that happened, but it's something to be aware of, that your legislative districts may have changed. This is a process that happens every 10 years, kind of following the census. It happens at a national level, where US House of Representatives seats are kind of reapportioned, and then the states will redistrict both for the US House of Representatives and for state house seats. So this affects the 4 districts in Iowa for our US House of Representatives seats. And it also affects our Iowa House of Representatives and Senate seats as well. And this had a lot of kind of implications when they did redistricting. So we've seen a lot of people retire from the legislature. We saw some primary campaigns this summer for those seats, and there may even there's a few instances where there are incumbents that are running against each other for contested seats. So an incumbent Republican and an incumbent Democrat running against each other for a new seat. One thing I really want to stress here, if you go to the legislature's website and say, find my legislature, last I checked, it was still your current legislator for right now, but not necessarily who that is going to be this fall. So real quick here, I'm going to share this link in the chat. This is also a map that was put out by the Iowa legislature's staff, and it is a map that you can visit and type your address into, and it will tell you your districts for the redistrict districts. So I'm just going to take a minute. If everyone can visit this link, if you don't already know, visit that link, type in your address or your organization's address to see who your US House of Representatives or your US House of Representatives district, as well as your Iowa House district and your Iowa Senate district. So I'm just going to give everyone a minute to do that now and get a little sip of coffee. Everyone good? Figured that out? So who's running for office? On the ballot this November, we will have a number of candidates for statewide offices. So the governor and lieutenant governor race, secretary of state, state auditor, state treasurer, secretary of agriculture, and attorney general. And then for federal offices, we have one of Iowa's Senate seats is up for election. That is the race between Chuck Grassley and Mike Franken. And all 4 of the U.S. House of Representatives races. So these are all 4 of Iowa's districts. And again, those are the newly drawn districts. And then we have the state house races. So all of the Iowa state House of Representatives seats are up for election this year. Some of the Iowa Senate seats are up for election. That really depends on the kind of timing of the seat, and it also depends on whether there was an incumbent in office or in the new districts. So it just depends. Some Iowa Senate seats are up for election, some are not. You can find a list of candidates on the Secretary of State's website. I just posted that a link to that PDF in the chat. That has all of the statewide offices, those federal offices, and the state house races. So again, you're going to want to know your House and Senate district, and then look on that list to find that particular race. It will have a list of the candidates, and it will also have some contact information on there that's going to be helpful when you are reaching out to candidates to schedule a meeting. Any questions there? All right, so hopefully you can go through that list and see who is running for your district. And again, really want to stress here, state house races are really important. I think, they oftentimes get overlooked. People are focused more on the statewide races, the executive offices, the federal races, so House of Representatives and the Senate race. But, Iowa's state representatives and senators make very important decisions that affect our state. And this includes some of the welfare reform efforts we've seen over the past 5 years that would restrict access to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is something that the Iowa Hunger Coalition and a lot of other groups have been opposing. And, thankfully we can say none of those restrictions have been passed and signed into law. But it's really important that we have anti-hunger advocates in every single part of the state who have built relationships with their state representatives and senators. So when these, negative bills are coming up, we already have relationships with legislators that we can reach out to. Maybe they've already visited your food pantry or your anti-hunger organization. They've seen what you do, you've talked with them, and you already have some of that relationship built. You've built some trust, and they're going to be more receptive to what you have to say if you already have that existing relationship versus if you are, just starting from scratch there. And it will also help, as we're looking for sponsors and co-sponsors of some of our more positive measures that IHC is going to be looking at, that we'll talk about in a little bit, to identify who might be a good, sponsor or co-sponsor to champion some of these bills. So again, want to stress that state house races often get overlooked, but they are really important to the work that we do. All right, I am going to turn things over to EJ now to talk about some kind of tips for planning your meeting. And I can advance the slides, EJ, just let me know.
Thanks, Luke. I put in the chat some key upcoming and past dates around elections. You can visit voterreadyiowa.gov. Voter Iowa, excuse me. Well, we're just going to put it in the chat here. Voterready.iowa.gov, which is managed by the Secretary of State's website. So it includes all the ID requirements and a list of important dates that are coming up for absentee voting, and some information on that process, just so that you're informed as a voter and that your clients and staff are also informed about that as well. Those are important things. So let's move on to the portion where we talk about how you will make contact with your elected leaders and how you can plan a meeting. So we know who we're going to vote. We know who are on the ballot. We know what our issues are. How are we going to ensure that those elected leaders are going to prioritize those issues? Well, we got to make contact with them. We have to meet with them. We have to share our stories. I will say before I do anything that you are never expected to be an issue expert or a process expert or a law making or crafting expert. The people that you're speaking with probably know less than you do about the issue that you're talking to. There's no way, even the good ones, even the good elected leaders, there's no way that they can know everything about an issue. And so just know that you are being a resource for those elected leaders and folks that are hoping to be elected leaders representing you. And I focus on the fact that they're representing you because that is the power dynamic that you have in this relationship. These people work for you, or they're on a job interview to represent and work for you. So just like if you anybody in the chat, all right, if you are a manager of people and those people aren't doing the job that you hired them for, what would you do? What would you do if that person wasn't doing their job? Put it in the chat, And I'm going to go on, but make sure, and this is exactly the same thing that you should think about in terms of your relationship with your lawmakers. All right. So how you make contact with those elected leaders? Well, think about these essential questions. Do you or a supporter have a personal connection to the candidate? Do you have a personal relationship with that candidate? Do you have a personal relationship with anybody that's on staff with that candidate? Do you have a personal relationship with anybody that is in a position in the party that is attributed to that candidate? Those folks can get you into a meeting with that candidate or that lawmaker. Visit their website, social media, etc., to learn more about them. It's important, especially when you engage with them on the campaign trail. You've secured this meeting, or you see them at the grocery store. Remember, they're always on, they're always working if they're running for office. You can know a little bit about them to, one, make that connection. Maybe there's some things that you have in common. Maybe there's a religious similarity that you have, or maybe you've worked in the same field, or maybe your kids go to the same school. Those are important things to find out as well when you start stalking candidates. Attend coffee meetups, town halls, or events to make sure that to make contact and offer a personal invitation to meet with those candidates further. So a lot of times those when folks are running for office, they will post their schedules publicly. Sometimes they don't. SCAN, Save the Children Action Network, has a volunteer that is responsible each week for scouring the internet and signing up for what we call Google alerts. That's a process that I'm more than willing to talk more about at a different time. But basically, they are responsible for keeping track of candidate events and posting them on a shared calendar that we have as volunteers, so we can go ahead and try to find them. And the big thing to remember is that you are wanting to make contact as soon as possible. It's never too late. All the way up until the election day, you have the opportunity to engage with these people, to make connections, relationships. And after they're elected or not elected, that is also another opportunity to build relationships with them as well. So make contact now, make contact often. Next slide. Where will you, so in terms of inviting a candidate or elected leader to meet with you, think about the resources that you have that a candidate or elected leader really would like to get access to. So a food pantry, a distribution center, a childcare center, what have you. You want to be able to show these folks that you are a resource and that you have something to offer them. In terms of C3 engagement and C4 engagement, nonprofit engagement with candidates, you want to ensure that that invitation goes out to all the candidates in that particular race, so that you're not seen as giving favoritism to a particular candidate or a particular political party. So as long as you can show that you've invited all the candidates to that event and make sure that you give them ample time, you'll be able to protect yourself from any view that you're being particularly partisan. All right, next slide. Who else can attend the meeting? So think about staff that have a good story or experience with the issue that you're talking about. Since we're talking about hunger here, folks that work directly with clients that are in a particular group that maybe they can't make a meeting. I don't know what it is about lawmakers and candidates, but they just don't get it, that if they want to actually hear about the issues of working people, they need to meet with working people during the times that they're available. I'm not sure why they keep hosting these public events at like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. But that is an opportunity for you as staff to be able to share those stories. So collect them ahead of time, and you can always hand those out in print, and make sure to try to protect the identity of marginalized populations that you might work for as well. It is totally fine to say a client that I work for and not necessarily to name them specifically. Board members are another really great opportunity. We're always looking for jobs for our board members to be able to, honor their position. And candidate engagement and outreach could be a great opportunity between now and November to engage a board member that might have some particular time. And another thing that you want to do, like I said before, is really encourage the folks that you assist to be able to share their stories. I often tell my volunteers that the one thing that can never be taken away from you in a conversation with a lawmaker, or that they don't have access to, is your particular story, your personal story. Nobody remembers statistics. Everybody remembers the person. I used to always reference Joe the plumber in the 2008 race, right? Nobody really knows much about Joe the plumber anymore, but I think most people probably recognize Joe the plumber, the name Joe the plumber. Well, that's because that was a story that was shared on the campaign trail often. Okay, and so encourage your folks that you serve to tell their story. Save the Children Action Network hosts and can host elevator pitch and storytelling workshops. We have volunteers and volunteer leaders that can meet one-on-one with clients to help flesh out a really good story and give them the tools to meet with candidates on their own or as part of an event that you are hosting. Move next slide. So what will you talk about? Make sure that you mention your organization's mission. General education is really important to kind of set the tone or level set the conversation, but also you always want to tell the story of your mission, because you never know what kind of relationship you're going to be able to build in the future. A lot of people that are in politics are also in fundraising, and you have to be a good fundraiser in order to run for office. And so think about that opportunity as well for future engagement with these folks or their networks, even if they don't get elected in the future. I really think it's important for you to get a sense of what it is that you're wanting to talk about. Talk about like maybe your experience in increased use after pandemic era benefits were reduced. What has that increased use looked like? What has that done to the staff that you employ? What has that done to the centers and places that you distribute food? Have you seen an impact in SNAP reduction in your area? make sure that you share that story as well. Rising food costs, make it about the person, not about the politics of rising food costs. There's always going to be somebody that's going to try to make, well, that's Joe Biden's fault, or oh, that's Donald Trump's fault. You know, people are, or oh, it's this candidate's party's fault. That's that kind. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. If you can't give us a specific way in which you're going to address the problem, then you're not the right person for the job. And there's always an opportunity for you to make notes about that, especially when you share a report out to your board about the conversation that you have with that particular political candidate. And finally, talk about policies. Because we are engaging in a political advocacy conversation, you really want folks to understand, especially if they've held office in the past and they've voted for or against particular pieces of legislation that will impact your business and your mission. Talk to them about how that policy impacted your mission and your ability to address food insecurity in your community, so that they know that their policies actually have a direct impact. We run into this all the time with childcare. Right now, the governor has announced that there's going to be $36 million in additional aid to childcare infrastructure. Well, we can talk all we want about slots and investments in buildings, but if we don't invest in the people that actually do the work and in childcare providers, then there ain't going to be anybody to care for children. And so we need to reframe the issues as they pertain to what we are actually doing, and hold policymakers accountable to how policies impact our ability to do that. Next slide. And Luke, you were going to talk about our state legislative agenda.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I realized I kind of like split up your time, EJ, with me in the middle. But very briefly, kind of wanted to give everyone here a first look at IHC's 2023 state legislative agenda, because this may guide some of your conversations with candidates and legislators and the type of questions that you might ask. So first and foremost, we are committed to protecting and enhancing SNAP. This has kind of always been our top level priority. Some very particular pieces we are looking at this year are expanding income eligibility for SNAP to 200% of the federal poverty level. Right now it is 160%, to better reflect the state of food insecurity in Iowa. I know at the DMARC Food Pantry Network where I work, only 41% of the people we assist are actually enrolled in SNAP. And we hear from a lot of people that they make just too much to receive benefits. So we are looking at expanding that income eligibility up to 200%. And there's a number of states that have done that exact thing in the past few years. Second, and this is something we had on our agenda last year, we're continuing to push for, is investment in Iowa's Double Up Food Bucks program to incentivize the purchase of locally grown fruits and vegetables by SNAP recipients. And so I can put a link in here for more info on the Double Up Food Bucks program. It's administered by the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative. And they've got some good resources on there for advocating that. And then we want to continue to reject additional administrative barriers to access SNAP or any measures that will decrease income eligibility or decrease access to the program. So that's kind of the SNAP portion. Other items on our agenda are we're exploring legislation that would provide universal free school meals. For the past 2 years, everyone across the country was receiving free school meals. And this is the first, school year since then that people are moving back into paying for those school meals. Some school districts have community eligibility, but this is a really popular policy with the US general public. It has, when there's been polling, bipartisan support for this measure. And I think it just makes a lot of sense for people. So we're going to be working on that. And then addressing the root causes of hunger and food insecurity. We always want to be able to lend our support to any legislation that will increase access to economic resources, including quality and affordable housing, utilities, transportation, childcare, healthcare, et cetera. Policies that would divert food from Iowa's landfills to people facing hunger. So policies that would encourage food rescue and recovery practices of quality food that could still be used, getting those to nonprofit organizations rather than seeing those dumped in our landfills and contributing greenhouse gases. And then finally, promoting the purchase and distribution of locally grown food. There's a couple programs, the local food purchasing assistance program. I think I got that wrong. Giselle's on the call. She'll probably correct me later. But this is a 2-year program that will provide some money for this. And we want to start making sure we're laying the groundwork to talk about the success of the program and how we can continue that into the future. So that's our legislative agenda. And now I'm going to turn things back to EJ.
Giselle said you got it. So congratulations, Luke. Good job. Making the ask. So what an ask is in the organizing vernacular is the thing that you want the lawmaker or candidate to do or to agree to. All right, so move on to next slide. So the policies that we talked about, federal policies, state level policies, referencing the Iowa Hunger Coalition's legislative agenda, I think is a really important resource for you to take with you and reference. I know that Luke is going to share that widely and have that available online. You can always reach out to Save the Children Action Network for simple questions that you can take. But basically, most of the questions that we provide volunteers have these 3 essential parts, these 3 buckets. All right. So share an anecdote about the hunger crisis. Anecdotes, again, personal stories or narratives about how this particular crisis is impacting you personally, your organization's mission or ability to address hunger in the state. Share one direct example of how your organization is experiencing the hunger crisis. So again, share that, the direct example of how the experience has actually shifted the organization's ability to do that. So the difference between number 1 and number 2 is that anecdote is like the heart. The anecdote is like the heart, the thing that can't be taken away from you, the thing that I talked about before. The direct example is like the fact, right? You only want to include one fact in the conversation, just because you and I and everyone on this call is passionate about ending hunger. I'm passionate about ending hunger and the issues that I care about. All the time, I get into this rut, one, because I have ADHD, of just unloading in word vomit on the person that's across the screen from me or right next to me, all these facts and things that I've learned. Their eyes do what? They glaze over, right? Because they're just overwhelmed, right? You've already got them with the first fact. There's no need to further, to further convince them that this is something that's important, okay? So one fact. And then the third thing is offering a policy solution. So offering a solution is really important because there's the lawmakers and candidates are really good at saying things, having attitudes, some even, the way in which they shake your hand or look in your eye, you think, man, they're for us, man. They're with us. Yeah, they get it. They totally get it. Volunteers tell me all the time. They understand why kids need to have access to childcare. They understand why. Okay, cool. What did they commit to do? Nothing, because you didn't have that opportunity to offer up a solution. And that's the great thing to have the Iowa Hunger Coalition's legislative agenda and asks within that, picking one of those policy solutions. And then as part of number 3 is including the ask. Will you support this, right? Will you support this? Our state has an opportunity to address this by investing in the Double Up Food Bucks program, for instance. Will you support this, right? I have Iowa Hunger Coalition language to help you include this in your platform. And I add that anecdote because in Tennessee, back in 2018, we had a state candidate that didn't know anything about our issues, early childhood education, childcare, nothing. And through the process of our volunteers engaging with them time and time again, they went from being completely opposed to our issues to including language and investing state resources on a consistent basis in their platform on their website. So you actually have a direct opportunity to help evolve and create champions through this process and be a direct resource for that as well. So that's why having potential solutions and an ask for their support is really important.
I had a couple examples here, EJ. I'm not sure if you want to go through them.
Sure, and I think these would be really great to forward on to folks. But a really good example. Actually, I can see Randy. Randy, will you come off mute and read this?
Next year, Congress will be debating the 2023 Farm Bill, which provides funding for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Congress has an opportunity to strengthen the program and reduce food insecurity. What will you do to make SNAP more robust in its support for Iowans' hunger and food insecurity? I'm part of a Bread for the World group at our church. We have other people from the churches that come, and once a month we gather and we send things off. And we have a meeting coming up this Monday, actually, at the library.
Perfect. That's great. Yeah. And what was really great about this, and the reason why I asked Randy, and thank you so much, Randy. I got you. But the reason why I asked that is you can take a question like this and read it. There's no reason that you have to memorize this stuff. You can take it with you. Again, you know, if someone makes fun of you from the podium for reading your question and say you don't care about this because of your question, guess what you have in your back pocket that you don't even need to practice? Your personal story. And they look like a jerk. So don't worry about reading these questions. Next slide, Luke.
So I have the double up question here too. I don't know if
no, I think I think what you want to do is you want to send that to folks so that they can use that as an example. Thanks, Randy, for demonstrating kind of how easy that is and to take that with you. I would print those off in a card that's a little bit like a card stock or a piece of paper. Print off several different print the question off several different times, front and back, and cut it up into fourths, I guess, and then hand that out to people that are going to attend the event. And then they have that with them, no matter who gets asked to share, they can just go, thank you for taking my question, boom, and ask that question. All right. We also have other through the years, and this is going on my 8th year in Save the Children Action Network, but my 15th year in advocacy and organizing. I have a lot of experience on how to not only get a question, go into a situation and actually get your question asked, and also to get that question featured on the media. So that's another thing that we can talk about at a later time, or if you're really interested in that kind of organizing and experience. I will say a caveat to this. Let's say you or your volunteers or your board members aren't comfortable with going to an event and actually talking to a candidate specifically. Use the same strategies to write a letter to the editor. So you can craft a letter to the editor with those same 3 points: an anecdote, a personal experience for your organization, and then an ask for the community or an ask for that particular candidate. Keeping it short, just like what Luke said, the examples that Luke gave are actually going to give a better chance to get a letter to the editor published in the newspaper, because a lot of times there are word and character requirements and limitations to being able to submit and publishing that letter. Shorter the better with those things as well. But that's another resource I thought I'd make sure to mention. All right, the last thing that I want to mention, and I tell my volunteers this all the time: if you don't report it and you don't take a picture, it didn't happen. So please let us know if you were able to talk to a candidate and get a question asked and they gave a good answer. Send us an email at iowahungercoalition@gmail.com. this will help us share the information with folks. If you want to stay updated, we do this with our Save the Children Action Network team. You can always join SCAN in our efforts as well. But what we do is we share those answers with the team that is going to candidate events so that they know, hey, I heard from my friend that saw you on Friday that you said this about Double Up Food Bucks program. Just wanted to further clarify, does that mean that you're supportive of Double Up and that you will vote for and champion it when it comes up for when it comes time next session? That's an opportunity for us to keep that momentum going. And that's how we were able to get that candidate in Tennessee to include it in their platform. They're like, gosh, I can't keep hearing this question. I need to come up with an agenda item and put that on there. So please share that information and then we can maximize our efforts.
All right, so I kind of just wanted to do a check-in. How's everyone feeling? I thought maybe we could do a short little breakout, but I don't think we have the time. But if anyone's feeling, no, AJ, you are fine. I was not doing good time management myself. Share, if you want, in the chat or come off mute, share maybe some ideas that you've already got for planning a meeting, or any questions you might have about this whole process. And if we don't, Randy, go ahead.
Well, our local Bread for the World group met, and we actually had a Zoom call in with, I forgot the guy's name, guy at Northwest Iowa that replaced Steve.
Is it Randy Feenstra?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Just slipped my mind. Anyway, we explained what was going on and how we did it, and we chit chat. But then we explained, first of all, you can, without advocating what side you are on the aisle, just saying what you feel about this. And he agreed. Well, yeah, people shouldn't go hungry. Yeah, people should do blah 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 and stuff. And so he was able to talk a little bit. And then later, some people have kept up emails with him about what's going on. It was the first time I used to be president of League of Women Voters and names, and so we would have these candidate things too occasionally, and some people just wouldn't show up from the candidates because they didn't want to be questioned, and sometimes you would get the wishy-washy answer. But it was always very interesting to see, to me, how people would respond, and they would say, "Well, we'll wait and see." Well, that's not a response, but you would, what's your history? How do you feel about voting about this or that? So. I personally like it when you can catch them in a panel discussion, just because then you're going to see the body language, and do they have to check their notes on how they feel, or can they just tell you how they feel? Because it's like who's going to get the most votes. So anyway.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Otherwise, I know we're running short on time, so maybe I'll just get to the end and then we can have any final questions. So in conclusion, you can advocate and lobby, and it is very necessary to be doing that. Engaging with candidates is an opportunity to tell your story, to have people with lived experience tell their story directly to candidates, and really elevate the issue of hunger and food insecurity in people's minds. IHC has tools to assist you. We're happy to help. Shoot us an email at iowahungercoalition@gmail.com. We do have, and I'll drop this in the chat, it's our SNAP map, which has county level SNAP data. That might be useful when you're talking with candidates about the drop in SNAP benefits, to be able to reference numbers specific to your county or counties that they represent. So that's another thing you may want to check, is people's districts and which counties or parts of counties they are going to represent. And I guess finally, just let's all go out there and make a difference and get some candidate meetings scheduled and elevate this issue. Also want to mention, you are all, if you're on this call, maybe already signed up for IHC's email newsletter. If not, you can just go to our website and there should be a pop-up to sign up. You can like us on Facebook. And if you have any questions, email us at iowahungercoalition@gmail.com. EJ, is there anything you want to share about SCAN and how people can stay engaged with you?
No, so we we're very excited that we actually announced endorsements for 3 candidates. And I can say this, but we want to make sure to be aware. But one of the candidate that we are endorsing for Iowa Senate District 14, the new Senate District 14, is State Senator Sarah Trongariot, which happens to be a lifelong hunger fighter and a great candidate. So that we are doing a lot of on the ground engagement with voters to help her get elected. And if you're interested or you know someone that's in that district, we really need all the help that we can get. It's going to be a tough race, but there's going to be a lot of opportunities to engage in those really fun grassrootsy type activities like door knocking and text banking, texting voters, and writing postcards. And really, just the main thing is to share your story. And so that's the same thing with the other 2 candidates, but we're putting most of our efforts in that particular race. If you're not interested or comfortable doing that particular like direct engagement work, we are hosting monthly community action team meetings where you can learn more about not only issues, but also how to advocate. We always have a component that is related to education and action that we take together. So if you're in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Sioux City, or Des Moines Central Iowa area, please reach out to me and let me know that if you're interested in attending one of our community action team meetings or events, and would love to plug you in. Thanks so much, Luke, for inviting me to speak on this. And we're really excited to partner with the Iowa Hunger Coalition, be a member, and really looking forward to the legislative session where we can really get some stuff done for kids and families that need help.
Thank you, EJ, so much for being here and sharing your expertise. I did just drop in the chat. We have a very, very brief post-event survey. Just helps us make sure we're presenting the types of topics that our members want to see. I also saw that Natalie Veldhaus, who is the outgoing IHC chair and board member, mentioned we will have a Advocacy 101 webinar kind of at the start of the session to again talk about our objectives and provide some training there. So keep an eye out there, and just want to thank you all for being here. We'll send out a recording and slides to thank you, EJ. Yes, as a reminder, SCAN is a 501c4. They can endorse candidates. You can't. IHC is a 501c4. We've never endorsed candidates before, but it's something we've talked about maybe further down the line once we've built more power. So thank you all for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And feel free to email Iowa Hunger Coalition at gmail.com with any follow-up questions to this. So thank you all.
Thank you.